Good morning. It's Sunday, April 30th. And I am not happy with the makeup of the Supreme Court. They're too conservative for me. And it seems to me that they just have no respect for precedents, for things that have been in existence for 50 years or something they choose to overturn it. And so because of the actions of Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch with respect to the way they handle their personal finances and what the rules are for the Supreme Court justices to keep track of what they do with their lives, and how many, well, I don't want to say many, and how these two gentlemen have avoided filling out the appropriate documents when they have had some personal transactions. And Thomas, of course, acts like an idiot and says, I didn't realize I was supposed to tell the world about that particular thing. And that particular thing was the fact that he's cozy with this gentleman Crow, who is a heavy conservative donor and has for 25 years, ever since Thomas became a member of the court, he has been Thomas's friend and taken him on vacations around the world and flies him in his private plane. And all of that goes unnoticed. And Neil Gorsuch, in 2017, when he became a member of the Supreme Court, he had a real estate transaction and he made $500,000. And he sold this property to a high-priced lawyer who has constantly pled cases before the Supreme Court. And this is an item that should have been reported, but it wasn't. And I don't know, of course, it said he didn't know he had to report it or just forgot about it, whatever his excuse is. But transactions like that put a bad spotlight on the Supreme Court. So because of those types of things, there has been a big ruckus about something that I never knew about, a code of ethics. The Supreme Court has no formal code of ethics. They have some parameters by which they're supposed to live, but it seems like they ignore them as often as pay attention to them. So there was a lot of pressure put on the Supreme Court to develop their own code of ethics. And now the Supreme Court has come back to the public and back to Congress and everybody and said they're not going to do that. All 9 members of the Supreme Court agreed that they don't need a code of ethics. A code of ethics would only inhibit them in the way that they do business. Now, I don't understand how you could come to that conclusion. We're not asking them for life and death sentences type of thing. We're asking them for some set of rules that they can adhere to. But they came back and they said if they have a set of rules like this, that will interfere with the way they do their job. Now, we have 3 major branches of government: the executive branch, then Congress and the Senate, and then the Supreme Court. So the other 2 branches of government have a code of ethics of some kind. But the Supreme Court says, no, that will interfere with the business that they have to do. Now, we all know that the Supreme Court is a conservative, liberal, divided court. But on this particular issue, they are a unified battalion. And they said they do not need a new enforceable ethics code. So the 9 justices, no matter what their legal persuasion is, have voted the same way. No enforceable ethics code. Now, we all understand what makes each member of the Supreme Court have a different set of rules for how they come to conclusions on cases. And the rules are basically interpreting the Constitution. So there are strict interpreters of the Constitution, word by word, everything means something. And then there are those who are more flexible in the reading of the Constitution. And that's really what the basis is for how these members of the court come to their conclusion. The conservatives are very strict readers of the Constitution. And the liberals have more modern interpretations of what the the meanings in the Constitution are. So putting that aside, they all came to the same conclusion: no code of ethics. And they issued a document that's titled Statement on Ethics, Principles, and Practices. Now, this is the first time that they've ever done anything like that, because basically they were under pressure to live by the same set of ethics codes that other federal judges live by. But they say this statement aims to provide new clarity to the bar and to the public on how justices address certain recurring issues. And it also seeks to dispel some common misconception. Now, I don't know what kind of misconceptions there are. We see what goes on. We've gotten the reports on what they're doing. We've seen the decisions they've made. So I don't know what kind of misconceptions there are. If the justices don't report what they're supposed to report on the tax documents and things like that, there's no misconception about that. And the statement that I didn't know I have to do it doesn't cut any water with anybody. Could you imagine if you file a tax return and it's wrong? You go to the revenue people and say, oh, I didn't know I had to do that. You think they let you off the hook? So why would a justice of the Supreme Court think that's a valid excuse? And why would a justice of the Supreme Court allow his wife or any other relative to run around and be a spokesperson for groups that are trying to tear this country apart? And when issues come up that involve those types of action, the justice should recuse himself. It's as simple as that. You can't be a relative of a member of the Supreme Court and act in a manner that is detrimental to this country. No matter what your political persuasion is, you have to control yourself. And that's not what's happening on the Supreme Court. We know about the relative who was involved in the J6 insurrection and was constantly pressing people to turn the election over and then continued to battle for those causes. How can her spouse sit on that court and come to impartial conclusion? The bottom line is the members of the court, Roberts and his crew, believe that any code of ethics that is publicly acknowledged will provide information that will allow attorneys to take advantage of cases as they prepare them to the Supreme Court. And so that's one of the major reasons they are against the code of ethics. So I leave you at that this morning. A court that needs a code of ethics and has created an aura of excuses that serve no purpose. Have a great day. Bye.